which is there is no free informal lunch. So we had free lunch today, but as we can see, informality is not probably free, even informed project as it is. So what we will be talking about is actually, we will try to investigate more about cost of informal networking currently of entrepreneurs, but later on we will extend this to the household sector as well in the Western Balkan region. So I'm an economist, and my colleague ARMANDA, she's anthropologist, and we also have political scientists in the group and sociologists, so the group is very mixed. Informality in economics. So we had a lot of discussion because there is a good number of important topics for informality in economics, including informal economy, tax evasion, tax morality, informal employment practices, corruption, informality in entrepreneurship, ethnicity in economics, etc. So these are all important topics which are linked to economics. But what we wanted to do in the very early stage of this project is to do something new, something novel, something which is not covered by the literature. And I mean, I need to say that Ledeneva probably was the trigger point for this topic, because we had a nice discussion in Novi Sad and we said, okay, let's try to do something new which doesn't exist in the literature at all. So what we want to investigate through this case study, but later on after the survey, we'll try to do sort of quantitative and data analysis based on this topic, is cost of informal networking. Because there is a theory, I think very clear theory, there is some initial evidence on the ground, but we don't know anything about it. And especially about the Western Balkan region, where informal institutions are widespread. So theoretically, we have well-established argument that institutions are costly, but institutions. So it is costly to set up, implement, maintain, and change institutions. So this is not argument. But he also says institutions are formal and informal rules of the game. So this topic was investigated in the context of formal institutions, but actually informal institutions were neglected dimension in the research, and there is practically nothing about it. So what we argue, that informal institutions are also not free. It is difficult to measure costs related to informal institutions, because these costs include resources or money, but inevitably some invisible cost, as it is the cost of time, as you will see later on. Every social interaction includes some costs, and also interactions which are happening in the informal economy, or informality in general. So as the main theoretical underpinnings, we will rely in the initial stage on the new institutional economics and transaction costs economics. However, theory and practice, how to measure informal cost and what to measure. So why we decided to focus on informal networks. So informal transactions, exchange of information, experience and ideas, as well as self-enforcement in this case, are implemented through informal networks. So informal networks are mechanisms through which informality is actually happening on the ground. So we can say, is informal networking free? No. In line with our arguments, it is costly to establish them, maintain them, and expand them. So it takes individual effort and time and resources as well. But all this is rather neglected. We know all this stuff. I think we heard it a lot of times today. So what will be the main cost of networks, cost of networking? In the existing literature, we did really huge search of the literature over the last few months, a few of us. We did find some existing empirical research which is indirectly linked to this topic, and basically I will rely on these references. So the literature currently identifies the two main costs of networks, which is cost of time and cost of resources. So these are two dimensions, two costs which should be taken into account when we are doing the research. But there is also there are a number of points what affects the size of these costs on the ground. So first of all, it is network characteristics, definitely, because networks are producing these costs by definition, including network size, structure in terms of, for example, strong weak ties, and purpose, density of networks as well, diversity based on race or ethnicity, which is relevant for our topic, diversity based on family, friends, and acquaintances, and distance as well, which can be mitigated by IT literacy in this case. Next, costs are also affected by typical individual characteristics, including IT literacy, where there is a very strong emphasis on this determinant, age, marital status, gender, urban-rural division, occupation, social class, and the readiness to expand the network. So this is more linked to psychology. We found one nice paper about this issue, including also some other influences, as for example cost of formal institutions, because high cost of formal institutions, including direct and indirect cost caused by inefficiency of formal institutions, can lead that respondents rely on informal networks and they practically transfer these costs into informality, because they are by definition, they should be lower in formal in the context of informality. Business sector in the context of the business survey, because we aim to also do the business survey through our household survey, so it is important to control the sector of the economy, and of course country and region specifics are important in our context. So what will be the methodology? I am an economist, but I also got some biases and comments from my colleagues. Of course, we will start with literature review. I think everyone starts with that, with particular focus on economics of networks, friendship literature, transaction cost economics, and new institutional economics. We will identify available primary data sources. There are some data in the region. For example, in Bosnia, there is a nice database produced by UNDP. I think we can use some data from Scopes, Project RRPP projects, etc. But the main data will be gathered through semi-structured interviews with entrepreneurs. So the idea is currently to do approximately 10 interviews per country, and so far we have a group that will include Bosnia, Albania, Serbia, Macedonia, and from yesterday Slovenia is joined the club. So this will be a multidisciplinary oriented case study, very challenging as Eric said, and will include combination of economists, anthropologists, sociologists, and political scientists, already said that, and will include a comparative analysis between involved countries and will provide some policy implications. In order to prepare ourselves for, let's say, this presentation, and also to see the feasibility of the idea, the core team in Bosnia conducted 7 interviews with entrepreneurs. So these were piloting interviews conducted this month with small and medium enterprises, actually owners and managers of these enterprises, with the aim to check understanding of the topic by entrepreneurs, to get some inputs for our informed questionnaire that we are still developing, although we are in the final stage, and also to get inputs for sharpening and focus and feasibility of the case study. And I will present very quickly some initial outcomes from these interviews, although they were done by economists, so there is some concern with that. It is necessary to link the concept of networking to local language, because what we realized is that people understand better when we use their language. For example, in Bosnia we say imati svoje ljude, or in English it would be like to have your own people. Like I have my people, actually it is my network on which I can rely when I want to do something. We realize that it is very important to explain them in advance what is the purpose of interviews, because in one case we realized that person actually thought that we were talking about corruption, and we couldn't get so much from him from this questionnaire. When I later explained him when we finished recording and everything that it is not corruption, he said, why you didn't say? Because he didn't want to respond to our questions properly. There is some struggle in estimating time and cost of networks by entrepreneurs, but still they provide some estimates. You will see some examples. Generally, we find with these cases that majority of them emphasize time effort more than costs. Because some of them say, well, that is not a huge cost for our businesses. But actually, it is much more problematic to devote time to support our networks and keep them alive, because they say you have to keep them alive. And it is more important to be in touch with these people rather than to go and, bring them some gifts or pay coffees and so on. Majority of them finance these costs from their businesses, but sometimes no. And on average, what we have realized, probably this is not the proper language, entrepreneurs don't like informal networking. This is what they say. But they presented this in a way that it is a necessary strategy to cope with the environment. Like, yes, we are doing that, but this is not because we do like it, but because we have to do it. So let's see some quotes. I will read one quote per topic, but you can see these others. First of all, importance of networking for entrepreneurs. He said, for example, when I go to court, I can finish something in a day if I go to someone I know. But I must wait for several days if my connection is not at work. And you can see these two quotes as well. Formal and informal mix. Some of them claim that there is a problem to distinguish between formality and informality. With many people from business sector, I have developed friendly relations, so it becomes a difficult task to separate the formal and informal meetings. I could not distinguish spending money on different meetings as cost nor investment. While you are spending time with people from business sector, you never know if you are doing business or having a break. I like this. Size of informal networks, they could estimate the size. We got sometimes precise answers, sometimes not, but when we lead them through the interviews, they could provide us with some responses which are, let's say, which seems to have credibility and accuracy. For example, one of entrepreneurs says, if we look as far as to the lowest levels, then even more than 100 people. Because success can be measured by the broadness of your network. The broader it is, the more successful you are. This is something which many of them claim. So they believe in these networks. They rely on them. And even they see this as a step towards, let's say, making better business. Cost of informal networks in terms of money. We also got some estimates, and majority of them, I mean, this was piloting stage, claim that these costs are not high for them. It's not a problem to pay these costs. But I will say the last quote, which is an interesting one. I think 30 to 40% I pay from my personal budget. Actually, the rest he said that he pays from the business. And these are not costs for the company. I think this is important, but investment which brings you some returns in the future. So they not only decrease your future costs, but time waste as well. So this is how they see the role of these costs. Estimates in terms of time they spend. Also, they were struggling, so we tried to lead them in a way that we get approximation of working day or working hour, because in this survey we'll have their income, so if we get estimates of working days or hours they spend through these networks, then we will be able to recalculate time into money. So there is one quote from here, which is, well, on the strong network I spend some 8 to 10 hours a week, and with people from business circles I spend some 10 to 20 hours a month. So this entrepreneur was very precise in even distinguishing between two types of network, although we didn't ask him. Actually, this is what he said without our guides. So after all of this, still I can say this might be an interesting case. I would like to hear your comments, but what I need to say is that we do have some concerns, because, as I told you, this is new, this is challenging. We don't have clear, at least empirical guides. So there is a theory, but it is not focused on this aspect of institutional economics, let's say. It is challenging obviously to distinguish between formal and informal networking, as we could see. There is some struggle in estimating time and cost, but some proxies is possible to obtain. So this is, I think, our aim, to be the first to bring something new, but not to reinvent the wheel in this case, probably. And probably this case study, at least at this stage, doesn't have so many policy implications which are EU relevant. But I had discussion with ARMANDA today. I mean, economics is, or economy is quite universal. It is, I mean, it's very difficult to say EU economy or Western Balkan economy. I mean, economy is economy. So I believe that any policy implications are also relevant to the EU in that respect. However, so the idea is also to include some questions, and we already included these questions into the survey, and to try to estimate later on an empirical model which will be estimated for the household sector and business sector as well, based on these determinants which I presented in the very beginning. So what we see from the literature is that if we get an estimation of costs based on resources and time, then we can analyze determinants which affect these costs. And these determinants which we should control and for which we have the data include network size, characteristics, strong weak ties, ethnicity, income class, distance, country specific, formal institutional cost. We do have some questions previously used, and individual characteristics including willingness to do the networking, experience, occupational status, urban, rural, gender, marital status, IT literacy as well. I think we do have majority of these questions already in the survey, not all of them, but I will try to convince Peja, if you like, this presentation, and all of you to include probably just one or two more questions in the very end. Because for empirical analysis it is important that we have all these variables, otherwise later on we can't do anything with them. And finally I will finish with research questions and policy implications. So what is the size and structure of informal networking costs for entrepreneurs in the context of this case study? What is the main link between networking cost structure, purpose, and formal institutions? And what are determinants or factors of networking costs which might be targeted by Western Balkan and EU policy makers? So that's it. Thank you very much.